Good morning. This is Don Palayo again, checking in with you guys. Today is June 28th, 2025. I put out a new video a few hours ago regarding retirement planning, building wealth. I'm putting out a few videos out there like that. The main reason I'm doing that is because I want to help people that may, some of this is common knowledge that some people may already know. But I also think it's important, especially for you that have children, to be teaching your children this stuff. I think it's important that our kids know that they have hope. I think there's a lot of pessimism out there right now, especially for the younger generations. Um, the key for young people right now is to keep their expenses as low as possible, as long as possible. Start saving as early as possible, investing as early as possible. The earlier you start, the easier it is. If you wait until your 40s to start retirement saving, it's much harder than if you start in your 20s or even in your late teens. Teenagers, if they have a job, they can open a Roth IRA and fund a Roth IRA. They can put a little of it. They don't have to max it out for the year, but if they can put $1,000 a year into a Roth IRA and they have 50 years of compounding on that, that's going to be a huge amount of money in 50 years. So, you know, um, sure, 50 years from now, things are going to be more expensive too, but typically, generally speaking, the market rate of growth exceeds inflation, generally speaking. Not every year. We've had some years here recently where that hasn't been the case, but it doesn't feel like. But generally speaking, if you look at historical data, uh, the market has far outpaced what inflation has done. So I would just encourage you parents to be talking to your kids about this stuff. I really want to get with my older daughter and start working with her on this stuff. I've had a custodial account for her that I've been putting money into, but she's starting to work now and she's starting to put, save a little bit, but I don't think she's doing any retirement savings yet. She probably needs to be building her emergency fund right now and having some goals that way. And I really need to talk to her about that. Um, that's kind of the reason why I've been putting those videos out. I just want to be able to be helpful for people. Um, just kind of a reminder. This is going back to my earliest videos that I put out. Why is my channel called The Spanish Knight? Well, the reason I picked that, I lived in Spain for a couple of years, just for those of you that know. I was born here in America, but I lived in Spain during when I was 19, 20, 21 years old, 19 and 20 years old. Came home just before my 21st birthday. Um, but Spain has a lot of history that I find interesting. When I took my pseudonym Don Pelayo, that's not my real name. Don Pelayo was the first leader of the during the Spanish Reconquista. He was the first one to begin fighting back against the invasion that they experienced, that the Christians in Spain had experienced when the Muslims invaded in the early 700s. For those of you that don't know the history, Spain was part of the Roman Empire, and of course, when Rome fell in the late 400s, Spain was taken over by a people known as the Visigoths. They were kind of Germanic tribes, but they were also Christians. Um, the Visigoths took over that area of the world, the Iberian Peninsula, and the problem with the Visigoths was that they liked to fight a lot, and once they had taken over the Iberian Peninsula, they really didn't have any more enemies to fight, and so they began to fight amongst themselves a little bit. Some chieftains would rise up, and they would kind of vie for control over everything. And basically what happened was the Muslims saw the weakness over there, and they crossed over the Strait of Gibraltar and invaded in the year 711 AD, and they the Muslims were victorious, and they began to push the Christians back. The Christians were forced to flee into the very far north of Spain, and some mountains up there in the far north in the region known as Asturias, and they hid out. There were caves in those mountains, and the Christians just hid up there in those mountains for about 10 years. And during that time, the Moors, the Muslims, they began to consolidate their power there in the Iberian Peninsula. Well, about 722 AD, the Muslims knew that the Christians were up there in those mountains, and they would routinely send regiments out to say, "Hey, this is ours," and to maintain their control. Well, one of those regiments wandered into the mountains, and the Christians launched a surprise attack and wiped out that Muslim regiment. The leader of those Christians was a guy named Pelayo. Don is just kind of a title over there. Don is a title of like lord, or he had been nobility among the Visigothic people, and he so he's the one that I took his name just because I think we're almost in a position like this. It's a little bit of a different situation for us, but when I think about the situation that we're in, it's more of a cultural. We have our backs against the walls culturally in the West. It's not just the United States. Europe is probably even worse off than the United States is, but I feel like our cultures are under attack. And there's things that we can be doing to strengthen ourselves, and it's going to start with our local communities. We have to start within our local communities. It starts with our families, and strengthening our families, making sure that our families are educated, knowledgeable, skilled. I do believe in the prepping concepts, the idea of having of being prepared for emergencies, things like that. But I think it even goes beyond just survival concepts. It goes into education and developing, and a lot of them do believe in developing skills and everything too. Having a firm understanding of our government, our system of government, having a firm understanding of history. A lot of our kids are so brainwashed into this modern culture. This modern culture is it's just sick. I hate that. Our society is sick, and we need to get back to more traditional values and more traditional a more traditional way of life. I think that's why everybody's so unhappy. It's one of the reasons why everybody's so unhappy right now. Um, there's a lot of Americans that want the government to do more for them, and America traditionally has been about individualism, has been more about you taking care of yourself and your family, um, being charitable. If you have extra or have a surplus, you find charities that mean something to you and you give. But America has not been about government compulsion, uh, redistribution. That's never been America. That never has been. And those policies are sounding really good to some of these young people right now. And that's a problem. That's a problem. I think the real reason why we're seeing more of that right now is because our capitalism is the best system that humanity has created thus far. Even they always point to, oh no, socialism, when they talk about socialism, see, there's a separation between the economy and the government. So the economic systems of all of the European countries are capitalist. All even Sweden, Finland they're all capitalist countries. They all have property rights. They all have free markets. They all have. I mean, all of that is all of the European countries are pretty much that way. I can't think of any right now that are not. But so in terms of the economies, they operate on capitalist principles. The the governments, the people of the European countries have chosen to pay higher taxes and have made, for example, universal health care a priority. It's a priority for the Europeans that their government provide health care to the people. They believe that that's a government responsibility, and they pay higher taxes in order to pay for that. Um, Same thing with a lot of the education. There's a lot of places in Europe where they get free college. They get, their college education's paid for. And same thing, they're paying higher taxes in order to pay for that. America has chosen to go with a different model here in terms of our government. We choose to pay lower taxes, although I feel like our taxes sometimes are still pretty high, but they're paying higher rates in Europe. A lot of these European countries are well over 50% taxes. Um, but the in terms of the United States, we just prefer to pay lower taxes and put more burden on the individual if they want health care. They either get it through their employer, they get health insurance through their employer, or they pay for their own personal insurance policy, or they pay for and then they pay their deductibles and all of that, so their premiums on their own individual policy. So it's two different systems, but we're both capitalist systems. Europe and the United States are both capitalist. Japan is capitalist. South Korea is capitalist. There are some communist countries. China is kind of a hybrid right now. They're allowing more free market stuff to happen in China, although the government keeps a very very firm grip on everything. Um, North Korea, of course, is completely communist. Um, so it's just the capitalist system is the best economic system that we have. The principles of free market and private property are good principles. Um, that's not the problem that America's having right now. Right now, the problem America has is that there's not enough people, not a big enough percentage of our population is benefiting from capitalism. And whenever you go through a period of time where a large percentage of your population is struggling and is not feeling successful in the current economic model, they start looking for alternatives. And that's why the guy in New York won. Mamdani won up there in New York for mayor. I think it's because people are frustrated. They don't feel like they're succeeding in our current economic system, and they want something to change. So for those in leadership of our country, we need to put some policies in place so that more people are benefiting from our capitalist system. I do feel like there is too much wealth concentrated in too few hands. It feels like right now, it just feels like the only people that are really benefiting from capitalism are corporations and business owners. There's just too many other people that are just not getting much out of it. We've seen a huge increase in productivity over the last 50 years, and the workers have benefited very little from that. It's all gone to increasing the values of our corporations and increasing the shareholder wealth, and very little goes to the employees. And that's got to change. That's got to change, you guys. That's got to change. Um, we went through a period where unions were powerful in this country, but and the unions, things were kind of going the opposite direction. Labor got a little too big for its britches, and they kept demanding more and more and more. Well, eventually, the corporations, and the governments too couldn't meet these expectations of the labor so eventually these unions started to die off. Companies started taking their jobs overseas, where they didn't have to deal with that. So there needs to be a better balance. I feel like we need a balance between corporations and labor, business and labor. We need a better balance of power. Right now, I think business has too much power. We need a little swing back towards the labor area, to the employees. I realize that businesses have to make money. We realize that, but profits are at record highs for a lot of these companies, and they don't pay that much in taxes. And we see that in the news where these companies are paying. Sometimes they don't pay anything. It's like, wait a minute. So that's got to change. It's got to change. It has to. So otherwise, you're going to see a larger and larger percentage of our population look to these other solutions, and we don't want that. We don't want I do not want the United States to go socialist. I don't. I know that capitalism is a better system. I believe that people are capable of taking care of themselves if they are rewarded appropriately for the work they do. Um, right now, I don't feel like the employees are getting a fair shake from their employers, generally speaking. There are some employees that it's pretty fair. I think generally speaking, though, there's more power in corporate America, and labor has been kind of stiffed and has been denied some of that benefit. I think partly it's these, there's a lot of jobs that have gone overseas for cheaper labor. Labor costs overseas are cheaper, so we're competing. That competition is driving down labor cost. The value of labor. That's part of it too, and it's like I think we really kind of shot ourselves in the foot. Um, with American corporations taking all these jobs overseas. I think our politicians really didn't fight enough for the workers, when all that was happening. I think our government, our politicians should have fought for us. And I think the reason they didn't is because they probably had money stuffed in their pocket. So anyway, it's complicated. But the reason we're seeing a certain segment of our society embracing these more socialist policies is because not enough people are benefiting from capitalism. So we need probably we our tax structure needs to be modified. I do feel like taxes probably need to be reduced for the working class. I think the wealthy are probably paying about where they should be. You know, I don't believe some of these tax policies I've heard the left talk about. I don't believe in. I don't believe in taxing unrealized gains, for example. I think that's crazy. Um, I think we should be taxing realized gains, and also there probably need to be higher taxes in terms of Social Security, for example. I think Social Security tax needs to be on all earned income. The cap needs to be lifted, and that would help shore up our Social Security system. I think so. I'm kind of in the middle on this. Some of the Democratic policies I think are nuts, like the tax on unrealized gains. I think is crazy, but I think lifting the cap on Social Security tax is absolutely a good idea, and that needs to happen. Um, businesses, I think I think we've just got too much wealth concentrated in these businesses, and it's like they're trying to run up the stock market as much as they possibly can, and it's all about corporate earnings and how well the stock market is doing. That really is not helping our society in America. You know, it's helping a certain segment of our society, but it's not helping the vast number of people in this country, and that's the problem. Anyway, those are my 2 cents about all of this. I think that we need a fairer tax policy for the working people of this country. I think we need to see a fairer, more power going to labor. That's not necessarily a union thing for me. It's just I think we need some policies passed by our government who are supposed to be representing us, but very most often it feels like they're representing everybody but us. I hate to say that, but that's the way it feels to the average American, I think. Um, so we need some policies passed that are going to allow more of the wealth to pass through to the workers, to the people to the employee class. Um, that's my 2 cents. That's what I think. I don't think Washington D.C. really cares one iota what I think, but what I would say to the politicians in Washington D.C. is the fewer people that are benefiting from when you have the vast bulk of the people in this country not benefiting from the current system, the more at risk your positions are, because they're going to throw you out of office. They're not going to want to reelect you. If they're not benefiting from the current system, they're going to elect other people that may have radically different policies. Just keep that in mind, Washington D.C. Anyway, this is Don Pelayo checking out. You guys have a great weekend.